Hello, this lecture is focusing on how to write an argumentative thesis statement. So, the really important thing that we want to consider is why do we really want to be strategic in how we create a thesis when we're creating an argument? So, the primary purpose of this is the thesis statement in any type of paper is guiding readers. So, for an argumentative thesis, we really want to make that argument as explicit as possible. So, this really works in multiple ways. The primary function of this is so that as the essay progresses, as we present claims, as we present evidence, there's no question as to what we want our readers to be focusing on and where we're going with that argument in general. This also really helps as a secondary function to unify that paper. So as we're presenting different claims and different evidence, the readers know that they should be thinking about how that all works together for that overall argument. And lastly, it just makes the argument clear and concise. So there isn't really any kind of question as to what the reader should be taking away from that argument. So as we are working towards writing our own argumentative theses, there are 4 specific characteristics we want to aim for to make our thesis statement as strong as possible. So the first characteristic is an argumentative thesis should be focused and not too broad. So what this means is that when we're focusing on an issue to argue about, we are really narrowing it down because, of course, depending on the overall issue, there might be a number of factors, there might be multiple arguments that could be made. And if we try to tackle too many of them in this essay, we may fail to make it persuasive, or it may be too rushed. Another thing in terms we want to keep in mind for this and being focused and not too broad is when we narrow our argument, we're only focused on a specific sub-issue, then that means that we can make sure our claims are as thorough as possible. Because of course, depending on the length of the essay, we have a limited amount of time to be persuasive. So by limiting that focus, we're able to do that. This also allows us to be more efficient in how we're presenting our claims, evidence, and rhetorical strategies as a whole. So take, for example, the argument that could be made that technology helps society flourish. So while this is an argument, it is really broad. Because if we think about the different types of technology that can help society flourish, that could be transportation, communication, even if we think of like internet, social media, if we think about manufacturing, if we think about a million different types of technologies, especially as we go back in the history of technological advances. So that could be a dissertation, which would be very, very long. So if you're writing a short essay, a short argument that's relatively 3 to 4 pages, then that would be too much. There'd be too many claims or different types of technology we would need to address. So we would revise it. So I have a revised example. Transportation technology has helped society to flourish by making it easier to access goods and to travel. So this is now focused on a specific type of technology. So now within that argument, I am limiting it so readers aren't going to be thinking, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? They know that we're solely going to be focusing on transportation when addressing how technology is helping society. The second characteristic we want to make sure we're keeping in mind when we're creating an argumentative thesis is making sure that the thesis is centered on a debatable topic. So if the topic isn't debatable, then of course there isn't an audience to persuade. It would make it more of an expository writing because of course everybody is in agreement. So of course that really changes the whole purpose of the paper. And of course we don't have to think about rhetorical strategies in the same way. So we need to have topics that have different sides, different perspectives, different nuances that we can address. So take, for example, I could have a statement that reads, we use technology every day. So this, of course, is not an argument. It's not debatable because, of course, everyone would agree with this statement. So I would need to revise it to make it more debatable. So I can turn it into a statement that technology has improved our ability to communicate with others. So this, of course, if we think of the language used, the emphasis on improved, that is debatable because, of course, there are a lot of perspectives in terms of technology taking away from communication versus helping communication. So this would be a good thesis statement. Our third and arguably most important characteristic for an argumentative thesis is an argumentative thesis picks a side and takes a stance. So this is really linked up with the debatable issue. So when we have a debatable issue, we can't present both sides of that issue because that really turns it into an expository piece of writing. In order to take and create an argument, we need to take a side so that we are presenting one perspective and we're trying to persuade an audience to agree with that one perspective. So choosing a side, taking a stance, it allows us to then narrow down and present actual claims. So we can then think about how can we persuade the audience to agree with that side? How can we get that audience to essentially, if they kind of were on the opposing side, how can we get them to change their minds, especially? So to illustrate, we have the original example. We can make the statement that technology has created many benefits and problems for society. So this, if we think about the language, benefits and problems, it's presenting both sides of that argument, which of course is telling us that this is an expository thesis. So I revised it to just take one of those sides. So we could have the revised statement that technology has helped society to advance. So now it is very clear that I'm not going to be focusing on the problems. I'm just going to be focusing on those benefits for the argument that I'm making. And our fourth and final characteristic of an argumentative thesis is that an argumentative thesis makes claims that will be supported later. So this is really rooted in the idea that our thesis statement is guiding readers. So while with our thesis we're guiding readers into the point that we want them to agree with, when we include the claims or indicate the types of claims we're going to be making, that really helps readers to see and forecast the different things that they should be looking for. So of course, it doesn't just answer what is that argument, but how are you making that argument? So when we think about this, this is a way of narrowing that argument even further, and of course, using it as a specifically signpost or roadmap for that audience. For example, we can have the thesis that technology has helped society to advance, so it's taking a stance. However, it's not showing and clarifying how it's helped society to advance or even what technologies we're focusing on. So when I revise it, those are the things I want to clarify. So I could have the revised argumentative thesis that reads, technology has helped society to advance because of how it has increased communication and production of goods that make life easier. So I have the subject that's clear, I have my debatable topic, I've chosen my side, and now my audience knows that I'm going to be focused on claims that focus on technology and communication, technology and the production of goods, and technology just making life easier.